Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop Fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Hemp Foods European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rusties taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
The Green Mile is over. Oh, God. Sometimes the Green Mile seems so long.
You think if a man sincerely repents on what he done wrong, that he might get to go back to the time that was happiest for him and live there forever. Would that be what heaven's like?
I just about believe that very thing. John Coffey, you have been condemned to die in the electric chair by a jury of your peers, sentence imposed by a judge in good standing in this state. Questions?
Do you leave the light on after bedtime?
I know violent men. I deal with them day in and day out. There doesn't seem to be any real violence in him. Until he kills a couple of little girls. John Coffey is a murderer. I don't think he did it at all.
Take my hand, both. You see for yourself.
You're talking about a miracle. I do not see God putting a gift like that in the hands of a man who would kill a child.
I dreamed of you. We found each other in the dark.
Like he dropped out of the sky. Miracles are funny things. You never know when they're going to happen. And when they happen in a place like this, that's the most unbelievable miracle of all. This is the story of a miracle that happened here where I work, on the Green Mile.
The Green Mile, Andy. We're following up on our King Darabont #1 last week of the Shawshank Redemption. The movie's written and directed by Darabont, adapted from Stephen King stuff. And I say stuff because this was not a single book originally, right? This was the serial.
Correct.
It was released serially.
It was, yeah.
I haven't read it. You have read it?
I did. I read
it
when it came out. Actually, a buddy of mine told me, he's like, you have to check this out. It's so cool that he's doing it this way. Because, yeah, Stephen King wanted to release it in that old method where a book would be released serialized. And like every month, a new chapter would be published. And so over the course of 6 weeks, you would get you'd go to the store and pick it up. And they were super cheap because it was only tiny little book, and you'd get like a chapter. And so the first one was The Two Dead Girls, and then The Mouse on the Mile, Coffey's Hands, The Bad Death of Edouard Delacroix, Night Journey, and Coffee on the Mile. So those were the 6 chapters released from March 28th, 1996 to August 29th, 1996.
And was it a good read? Do you remember liking it?
I remember liking it quite a bit. The one thing that I think came of when you get to the end and you feel how the whole thing played, because of the way it ended up getting released, I did find that it felt episodic because it really was like chapters. Like you have first it's focused on this thing, and now we're focused on the mouse, and now we're focused on this. And that really came across in the book. And when I saw the film, I did feel a little bit, there is this episodic nature to the way the story kind of unfolds.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear in the movie to me, too, even that I didn't read it. It does feel episodic to me, and I think it ties together well at the end of our Green Mile story. Is it built in the book with the flashback?
Yes. In fact, my recollection is we have a little bit more of that because I think it actually, it's possible it starts that way in every book or in every piece, in every serialized book. Okay. We're getting a piece of him in that period because there's more going on there. We have an orderly who is very much kind of the Percy type of character who is kind of abusing the seniors in this particular senior center. And over the course of the book, he seems to have it out for Paul. And by the time you get to the end, Elaine kind of puts him in his place. And it very much kind of a similar sort of thing where she, like Percy in the past, she reveals to him, hey, I have, some of my family are high up in the political system here in whatever state they're in. And, we can easily get you kicked out of here.
See, that feels like a great parallel, right? That feels like we're going to mirror the experience, and now we're going to put we're going to put our protagonist who has experienced all of this in his past life, we're going to put him in now, we're going to change his perspective. And now he's going to be essentially an inmate in this home. And we're going to see kind of how things play out for him. And there is a lesson thematically in that, history teaches us nothing, repetition kind of experience. And I think King does that really well. And whenever he, I haven't read all of his stuff, but whenever he plays with time, he usually does it to great effect. That is lost, I think, for me in this movie. And in fact, I hate it. I hate it with a white-hot passion. Old Tom Hanks it's unwatchable for me. Unwatchable. And I hate it.
Now, when you say old Tom Hanks, you're not talking about Tom Hanks in makeup. You just mean the character,
right.
Old Paul Edgecombe.
Old Paul Edgecombe. Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
Hate it. And I love the rest of the movie. I think the movie should have lopped off the first and last 10 minutes, tell us the story, and get out. Get out. I don't need exposition junction at the end where he explains the life transference nonsense and little old mouse. I don't need it. It's stupid. It's stupid. I hate it.
Well, I think you're wrong. I think all of that works really well. In fact, I love how you get that sense of this place that this person is in, and he looks at it as a sort of penance because of what he did, because he had to be the one who basically put John Coffey to death. And now he looks at it as this penance. You know, he's living past everybody he knows and loves. They're all dying before he is. And it's, as he says, it's like, you know, this punishment that he has from God for killing one of his miracles. And I think that that's a really interesting way to look at that character, and to see, even though he was doing what he had to do as part of his job, and he had found that John was innocent, John kind of also said, you know, I get it, you have to do this, and whatever. It is this interesting way to kind of take that character and I don't know, kind of, for me, I found a sense of closure by having that. I mean, yes, it is that flashback structure that can be annoying at times, and so I get it. But for me, I think that it actually helps the story, because you kind of see how all of this plays out.
But see, I don't need it. I don't need it because I think we already have the redemption scene in the primary story. We already have John letting him off the hook, because Paul so clearly goes and asks him, I don't know what to do here. Like, I am awash at sea, and I need you to tell me what you want. If you want me to accidentally leave the doors open and have you just run into the field, I'll let you do it, because you are an instrument of, you know, his great work. And John already tells him, you're off the hook, man. You're off the hook. It's okay. I'm ready. I'm tired, and I'm done. And that is such an incredibly powerful sequence for me. And by the end of that, with the showering of sparks, and when he puts the St. Christopher back around Coffey's neck as he's dead on the gurney, all of that is the end of the story that I needed and felt completely fulfilled. Going back to the future just takes away from my interpretation. This is a rare case, Andy, where I think I want a less clear ending in the movie than it is given to me. This gives me essentially the Pete Wright ending. It is so clear and everything's tied up with a little bow on it, and I don't like it. That's weird.
Well, and see, that's so strange, because I mean, yes, Coffey gives him that. It's like, you know, it's okay, it's right, you know, it's going to put me at peace, like all that sort of stuff that he says in that particular moment. But what we get at the end is there's actually more to it. It's not just the fact that Coffey is you know, says it's okay. I know you have to go through this. It's not your fault. I'm just going to do it. But it's the fact that there is still a problem that it just intrinsically of Paul having to do this. And now, because he's the guy, it's like, I don't know, it's almost like this penance. And I think that's the interesting thing, that even though it was okay with Coffey, yada, 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 we're getting to this place where it's, you know, it wasn't okay with God is basically what's happening. And I think that that's really interesting, because he is now in this place where he has to live out the end of everything. And I don't know, I just find that I find it strong, the way that we have the ending this way. And he's left old and lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that is, and so much of the book, or so much of the movie is, I mean, it is a story of, you know, good and evil, condemnation and salvation. And what really is salvation, right? Even with this sort of explicit permission in the jail cell at the end of Coffey's life, nobody is saved, right? We have justice. Justice is absolutely served, but nobody is saved. The bad guys, Coffey takes care of the bad guys in his own special superhero way, but nobody is saved.
No, exactly. Yeah, they all. It's the system. It's a systematic, you know, kind of, or systemic way that everybody really ends up kind of finding their own punishment.
Now, my understanding is there is a lot more that goes on in the main Green Mile storyline around race and stereotypes. And here we have Coffey, who is he's threefold condemned, right? He's a black man. He is pegged as a murderer, but he's also a black murderer, and he's a black murderer of white girls. And that creates an explosive sort of conflict in this time and space that King is writing in. Do you have any recollection of how the film sort of streamlined that storyline? My understanding is there's just a lot more of that in the book.
I don't recall. I mean, I read it when it came out. That was
it's a long time ago.
25 years ago.
You're an older guy, so
thank you.
I get that.
I don't really remember. I just remember that largely my recollection of the book. I mean, is just remembering that there was more in the senior center at the end of the book. I don't remember as much going on.
Okay.
The additional stuff in the story. Did you find something about it?
There was much more in and around the humanity of the legal system, right? That my understanding is Wild Bill, as a young white man, was actually given another, like a retrial and a stay of execution, and that there was this whole sort of story around him and what he was able to get as a result of his privilege. Not called privilege at the time, of course, but as a result of just his, who he was, even though he was a horrific criminal and murderer. And once the truth comes out that Coffey was not exonerated, and they didn't even give time or attention to the idea of a retrial for Coffey because he was a black man, and that there was a sort of a litany on, this is where we're from. We're from a place that does not give time to Negroes in trouble. And he's convicted. He might as well be dead already, even though he's waiting on death row. And so that is, I think, something that, from my perspective as a white guy, it's an illuminating bit of the story that I feel like was rightfully excised from the movie because it's already long. But I found on examination of the themes of the film, I feel like I missed it a little bit. I missed that piece of it. I wanted a little bit more. It leans so much more heavily on the mysticism in the movie, and I think it would have been served, or it could have been served, by exploring more clearly some of the racial issues.
Well, and that's interesting because, there have been a lot of conversations about this film fitting into that magical Negro stereotype. That
he is literally a magical Negro.
Yeah, exactly. Spike Lee, I mean, he coined the term in 2001, or he popularized the term really, as he was kind of touring colleges in 2001, and he started talking about it a lot, and because he was very frustrated that Hollywood keeps telling these stories. I mean, this was right after The Legend of Bagger Vance and The Green Mile had both come out, both of which he said had super duper magical Negroes in them.
Yeah.
and he was very frustrated that this is still something that was happening. And Stephen King has been called out a few times on this. The Stand, which was, it was earlier before people were talking about it quite so much. And then this, which really, I think, kind of hit that turning point when things started saying, what, let's stop using this stereotype. It's getting a little ridiculous because, people would bring up things like Ghost and, there were characters in What Dreams May Come and The Family Man and things like that, where it is this character that's less concerned about their own person as they are everyone else in the story, and trying to help. I mean, it certainly is true in Legend of Bagger Vance, where he appears, Will Smith's character appears and just wants to help Matt Damon with his golf. And that's
right. Thank goodness there is this black man who can redeem the white man. When you talk about themes of redemption,
when I guess slavery is still a thing, and it's like, well, that's a weird thing. And same thing here. I mean, granted, Coffey is, he's in a prison situation. As we find out, he didn't actually do it. He is innocent. But it also, that end also sets up more of this emphasis of this magical Negro element, that here he is, this giant of a man who is also kind of a, I think you could kind of look at Lenny, the character from Mice and Men. He kind of has that. He's not so smart, right? And so I think there are a lot of elements that we're putting into this particular black character that kind of, he seems like otherwise. I mean, the film starts, we're looking at a chain gang as they're digging up a field, which I mean, instantly, that was how he started the film. And I'm like, that's interesting that that's how we're kicking things off. Or maybe it's as soon as we go into our flashback, we start that way. But, it just kind of emphasizes the fact that here is this man who it doesn't really matter what his story is. We know nothing about John Coffey. I mean, literally nothing of this guy, except he appears, he's trying to save these two girls and can't. And we realize over the course of the film that that's what he means when he's saying, I couldn't help myself. I tried to take it back, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
We realize what he's talking about as he realizes he has these powers. But when you hear him saying that, it doesn't come across that way when you find him with these two dead girls. And so, like, that's where we meet him. And we never get any story of this person. And so I totally see Spike Lee's point. It's like, this is a film where it's like there is no care at all for giving us any sense of who John Coffey is, other than the fact that he is here to kind of help these people on the mile and kind of, get things taken care of. And it's okay if he has to die because he's there to help them all. It's totally right there. And the more you think about that, the more frustrating the film can be. I still enjoy watching the film. I think it's a great film. I think there's really strong performances all the way through, but looking at it through that prism can make this a very frustrating watch.
Well, and that's why I wanted to go back a little bit to the themes in the book, because I feel like it does a little bit of a disservice of this as an adaptation if you don't look at what King was trying to do in the source material, right? It feels like leaning so heavily on the mysticism part, the magical Negro part, does a disservice to some of the legal mechanics and cultural mechanics that maybe King was trying to explore. And that, I think, is unfortunate. Looking at it as a movie, it's a white man salve, right?
Right.
It sure does make me feel good at the end, but I absolutely get it. And I think, maybe that's some of why I feel the way I do about this movie today in 2021 and watching sort of the cultural fabric change around us right now and over the last 5 years. This movie in that light maybe doesn't hold up quite so well.
Yeah. I think it does make it a little more difficult to talk about these days.
Let's pivot then to the death penalty. Right, this movie takes place on death row. This is I think he creates Darabont and King create a really lovely sort of culture in and around death row, and it's a
as
small
lovely
cast,
as one could create,
as lovely as one could
row.
Create. Right. It's an organism. It's sort of a self-healing organism. You can see it struggling with these viruses that are introduced in the form of Wild Bill and Percy, and you can, and then we make a bit of a judgment on the humanity and inhumanity of the electric chair, which I think is fascinating, in the death of Dell. How do you feel on some of these elements in the film? How well does it pick at you?
It's not designed like Dead Men Walking, perhaps, where we're contemplating the sense of taking a person's life who had taken a person's life. This is a film that's less about the complexities of the death row system. Like we're not looking at or the life of David Gale. That's another one that's looking very specifically at the prison system and death row and what happens when you execute somebody who actually was innocent. There are films that look at this system as more specifically like the positive and negative of death row, and is there justice when you're actually just doing exactly what this guilty party did. I don't think that this film is doing that quite so much as just looking at this situation where we have these guards who, they've taken this job where, what their job is to do is to, as Paul says to Percy time and time again, we are here to talk to the inmates, not yell at them. We are here to make them feel comfortable at this particular point in their life as they're getting ready to have it ended for them. And, so I think that there's an interesting and constantly looming sense of sadness in kind of the tone here, because, I mean, you look at, maybe not Delacroix's face so much, but certainly we see it when we're looking at Graham Greene's character, Bitterbuck. He just, he has a sense of sadness with him all the time, and we don't really know anything about him as a character, but he's here on death row. And honestly, sadly, I mean, I love Graham Greene. I love seeing him in films. His character is clearly written into the story just so we can see how an execution is supposed to happen. So when Delacroix happens, we go, oh, that was why this was so actually horrible. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the point is, it's a place of sadness. And I think that's an interesting element of the story, that perhaps it's more about kind of life and death than it is about the complexities of the death row system.
Delacroix's death is, I think, important to the film and to the sort of culture that we're exploring here. And that is how easy it is, one, for something to go wrong, and for, in this case, sadistic guards to kind of get in the way and exercise their own justice. But also, as things go wrong, the people that are there to sort of, for lack of a better word, celebrate the execution of this criminal can't watch it, and they run fleeing from it, right? And there is something to exploring the balance of like our willingness to accept what we have done to people as a society, to take criminals and then put them to death, but not be able to hang with the repercussions or the consequences of those choices. And I think that's important in this movie because, when you're talking about redemption and salvation, the populace plays a role, right? No one is redeemed from this. When we get in and we hear the dad scream, Sadler scream, kill him twice, that is not a redemptive or a saved statement, right? That's a statement of vengeance. And we, as the audience, are in the know of about the truth of the case. They are not, and there is no mechanic to get them out of this state of vengeance. And I find that really powerful, right? That final execution. Now that we've seen a quote, good one and a bad one, now we're getting to the worst one. It's going to be in the light. We're taking off the black cloth from his face, and we're going to see it happen, and we have to live with it. We have to live with those consequences. And so I really appreciate that in the movie. I appreciate that exists, and we're not litigating it at all. We're just feeling it. And that's okay too, right? There doesn't have to be a Susan Sarandon in the movie to actually make it a powerful message.
No, yeah, right. I think that's very true. Yeah, and I mean, I think that is perhaps where we get more of that type of thing is in the actual executions themselves with the people watching, and you get a sense of kind of like the way that these play out, where people come and watch, the people who have lost their loved ones to this particular person are there to see them, put to death, and other politicians and whoever it is who attends these. But you get lines like that, and that's I think where we see more than anything kind of that sense of how the system operates in anything. Yeah. And if anything, I think something that was interesting that you kind of glean from it is that these are guards. Like, he may have found out through, I mean, granted, it's through magical means and all that, but he may have found out that that Coffey is innocent, but he's just a guard. Like, he is in no place, even the warden, right? They're in no place to kind of strike up, the system and say, hey, you know what, this is an innocent man on death row. We need to look at the system and everything. Like, that's not what they do. That's not their job. And all they
That's why
really
Gary
do,
Sinise is in the movie for all of 3 minutes.
Right. Just to kind of point that out. But yeah, it's, I mean, the job's been done. All their job to do is to guard them and to march them down the Green Mile to the electric chair when it's time. To the point, just kind of following up on that, though, I did want to bring this up as it ties into kind of the whole death row thing, and to the magical Negro bit that we were talking about. Stephen King actually did respond to this. He said he saw this as a racial allegory. And this, I think, goes to your point revolving around Wild Bill, he said the only reason that he made John Coffey a black man was because of the time, place, and setting of the novel and the crime for which Coffey was convicted. It was the only way to leave no doubt that he would have been sentenced to death.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And to that point, in the book, there is a passage where Paul is talking about the phone on the wall, that there's always this phone and the cutaways to the phone. Everybody is waiting for the governor to stay the execution. And in the book, apparently, he says, in all of my career of doing this, the phone has never rung. There is never that sort of last minute salvation of these prisoners who are being put to death. It just doesn't happen. And again, a statement on time and place, a statement on, the humanity and inhumanity of the death penalty system. All of that feels like is mixed up in there.
Yeah, right. So do we want to talk a little bit about the Green Mile in context of kind of Stephen King and, what they call like the Stephen King multiverse?
I'm very excited about this, Andy. I know that it has really set you off on a journey, a magical journey yourself. And it did not do the same for me. And I feel like because I never read all of the books in the Gunslinger, I feel like I'm ill-equipped to talk about it. So please... How does the Green Mile fit?
You don't have to, nothing has to connect to the Gunslinger. I mean, that's what
I just assume everything has to connect to the Gunslinger.
No, because oftentimes they just all take place in Maine or whatever, and it's like, and that's something we didn't talk about last week with our guests, but in the Shawshank Redemption, this was specifically in the book, not in the movie, but Andy Dufresne, he is actually the banker for Dussander, who is the Nazi character in Apt Pupil. So
oh my God.
There's a connection in those two stories. That's really the only connection that Shawshank has. I mean, the prison itself is mentioned a couple times in some of the other books. And in the book, it's possible Shawshank is mentioned, but I don't think so. The only things that I can find, they're very small because this is very much separated from Stephen King's world because, it takes place in Louisiana. Largely, it's not connected. The only real thing that people talk about is the fact that the power that Coffey seems to have is very similar to the Shine.
Okay, so for those who don't know, talk about the Shine. What is the Shine?
Well, it is there's a variety of different kind of ways that it seems to come out, but largely, it really came out in The Shining, the book where characters could. They would sometimes, see ghosts and everything, and they would connect to these other powers, be able to kind of communicate and all this sort of stuff. And Coffey's power, the way that he is able to kind of read emotions and kind of connect to people the way he does, especially like during Delacroix's execution, the way that he sucks the poison out of we see him do it several times throughout the movie, and that's something that in the book, Dr. Sleep, not in the film, there is a point where Dan Torrance's character, he actually basically does the same thing. He kind of takes this in from a particular character in the book and then holds it for a very long time. And his character is kind of declining in health as he's going through this until he finally releases it. And it works exceptionally in the book, but it's a very similar thing that was done here. And so I couldn't help but think that was something that King was kind of patterning and kind of another element to say, yeah, Coffey, he shined. So, that's about it. Not a lot of things.
All right. So there is no reference to a Green Mile anywhere else.
There's
what we're saying.
No.
All right. So that's the Stephen King connection. Okay. The whole nature of I want to talk about the good and evil bit as demonstrated through our friend Wild Bill. Sam Rockwell is extraordinary in everything he does. Have we said that recently?
Probably not often enough.
Seriously, Sam Rockwell. I feel like his exploration of evil as chaos. He's sort of the Joker character, right? Like he comes in with very little history and just is the chaotic element until that one exchange that we have between Coffey and Bill, when he grabs his arm, he's already sedated, but for some reason he becomes lucid and is able to, when touching Coffey, exchange thoughts and have some sort of a psychic connection where he shares with Coffey all the bad that he's done. And we have another flashback within this flashback back to Bill painting the house and his work with Klaus Detrick and his family eating dinner and then eventually kidnapping the girls and using the girls' love of each other to keep them quiet, threatening them, if you make a noise, I'm going to kill your sister. If you make a noise, I'm going to kill your sister. And then he takes them off and kills them. I think that exploration of what evil looks like as just this sort of chaotic experience on the cell block is fascinating. And the way he is ultimately, purged from the system feels to me, it goes back to that organism pushing out a virus, right? It is an unclear resolution to his character. As clear as it is to have somebody shot, it was unexpected. And in that way, I think a little bit delightful. How'd you feel about the mechanics of giving the tumor bugs to Percy to then mind control him and kill Bill and then have the tumor bugs purged from Percy?
I found it incredibly gratifying. I mean, Percy is such an unlikable character. And I just have to say, Doug Hutchinson is stellar as Percy. I hadn't seen him in anything big before this or after. Well, I mean, he's been in like little bit parts and stuff, but I haven't really seen him do much. But like this role, it just like blew me away. And the way that whole scene plays out when they come back and Coffey had been holding it in, and then he finally like releases it all into Percy. I mean, it's horrifying, but you see what's happening and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't see that coming. And I didn't think that he was actually going to do something to Wild Bill. That was a great surprise to me, because it seemed like he was just infecting Percy, and that was kind of the end of it. But then when Percy gets down to Wild Bill's cell, and at first you're thinking, okay, so are the little, poison gnats, I'll call them, are they going to fly out and go into Wild Bill now? And both of them will be kind of taken with some sickness or something, only to see that Percy kind of, pulls his gun out and shoots Wild Bill. It was really interesting. And I mean, I don't know. I found it incredibly satisfying, because I mean, if Stephen King really knows how to do something well, it's create characters that you just hate, that you're just, they're such bad people, and you're just like, we've got to get to a point where there's some comeuppance, because these characters are just awful beings. And you certainly see that as this is all played out. And and then Percy ends up going to Briar Ridge, just like he had been planning. I don't know. I found it satisfying.
I did too. I think it was just, I think it was fantastic. I think the way they built that character and the sort of rage roller coaster that we go on kind of with him, and the way, in fact, we actually start to feel that sort of spark of hope that maybe Paul has gotten through to him. Maybe we're going to get to the other side of this, and lessons will have been learned. No lessons are learned, and ultimately things have to be resolved through mystical force. That same mystical force is at work in the mouse. Let's talk about the mouse. The mouse,
Mr. Jingles.
Mr. Jingles, as a vessel for goodness and hope and light on death row.
Yes, he certainly is that. He certainly is. I like the mouse. I think it's cute. It is certainly something that lends to that nature of the story feeling episodic, because when the mouse comes, you get that kind of that cute little kind of mouse music, I'll just call it, for lack of a better term. It has kind of a cuteness to it. It kind of takes things down, and we kind of slow down so we can spend some time with the mouse. And it's really cute. I like it. It also slows things down for me, but I think I don't know. I don't hate it. I think it's an interesting element to kind of have as a part of the story.
I do too. The entire mouse narrative, when they're standing over the mouse, the crew, Paul and Brutal and the team are standing down looking at the mouse and looking at it with such wonder. The fact that the mouse is sort of adopted by these guards is delightful for me. It does not slow it down at all. I could not get enough mouse and these like guards feeding the mouse. It just adds a sense of humanity and goofiness to this place where they are that has no humanity or goofiness. And I really liked it. It does not go so far as to make the movie in any way a comedy, but it does demonstrate heart. And I think that's an important thing when you also have a movie that demonstrates an electric chair going south and lighting their heads on fire. So I found it a good bit of balance that they introduced this mouse character, and I think did it well.
I think it does lend a sense of humanity to the people here on death row, particularly Delacroix. I see what King is also doing here, because by introducing the mouse, having it become attached to Delacroix and become this little like circus mouse and be so cute. I mean, Delacroix is, he's a criminal. He's obviously done some terrible things. He's on death row. And now we like him because he's attached to this mouse and there's this cuteness. So when he is killed, it's that much harder to go through.
Right. And somebody's going to take a whack at the mouse. Right. Yeah. Whether or not you fall in love with Delacroix and his use of circus mouse, the mouse is at risk just the moment they introduce it in this movie.
And that's a great surprise, actually, when all of a sudden, you're having this moment of conversation about Mouseville and all this sort of stuff and what are they going to do with him and all this. And then to have Percy come in and crush him at that moment when you're just not expecting it, because Percy's kind of taken a turn for a little while. It was a big surprise. It's like, oh, okay. Yep, we went there. So
my cat's name is Percy, and everything you just said about Percy really could apply to my cat. I think my cat's a sociopath.
Yes. Probably.
And would probably do the same thing to a mouse.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Probably.
It is fantastic. It used they couldn't do it with one mouse. You know stuff about mice?
Animals are difficult. Mice also don't live that long. I mean, it could have lived, for the duration of the film production, but they actually had to use 15 different mice because it's hard to train a mouse to do these things. And so it took a lot of work. Which is what
surprises the hell out of me. It's hard to train a mouse to do these things. And they found 15 of them that would do these things? 15
that it would do particular things, I would assume. Like,
crazy.
One would kind of probably sit up on its hind legs and look around. One would probably roll the spool. They'd find them to do particular things. But also, just as a note on mice also, the lifespan of a mouse is not very long. Generally, in good lab conditions, when they're really taking care of a mouse, not testing them and everything, a mouse could live up to 3 years. That's about it. So the fact that because of the power that Coffey imbues in this little mouse, and it ends up living 60-some years, that's a very long lifetime for this little creature. And it makes you wonder, by the time you get to the end of the film and you see Paul putting Elaine down and she's at her funeral and he's still walking around, it's like, how long is this guy really going to end up living?
Yeah, right. Because he was 108 in that last conversation. How long do you think Elaine lived after that?
Exactly.
She was pretty spry sitting at that table.
She was. She certainly was. Now, in the book, the mouse does die. I can't remember if it's before or after Elaine, but at least okay, well, the mouse actually did die, so that means Paul will die. But I mean, he could be a couple hundred years old.
It's magical mouse. You want to talk about getting it made?
I don't have a lot of information about it. I mean, obviously, Darabont had created a strong working relationship with Stephen King by this particular point in time. He had done, I don't think we even talked about this last week, but he started off working with Stephen King, or working, through Stephen King's stories, we'll say. In the 80s, he was one of the original, as they're called, dollar babies, where, Stephen King would let people make his short stories. They would just pay him $1 to license the use of it, and they could make one of the short stories. And generally, a lot of rules came along with it. Like, it could play at festivals, things like that. You couldn't make money on it. You can't stream them online. Like, there are a lot of specific rules that he has about them. And Darabont was if not the first, one of the first dollar babies that was out there. He actually wanted to do the story The Woman in the Room, and King, I don't know if it's the beginning, but he liked this idea of having people only pay $1. So Darabont paid him $1. He made this short film, The Woman in the Room, which is it's a kind of a touching, emotional story about a woman who is dying of cancer and her son who's debating if he should just kind of like overdose her on pills to put her out of her misery. And so it's kind of this dark little story. You can find it online to watch on YouTube and stuff. And Stephen King was really impressed with that. And so much so that eventually, like in the late 80s, that along with another short or two were released on video. Very rare for that to happen with these dollar babies. But because of the success of that, and Stephen King says it's still his favorite dollar baby that has been made. And there at this point have been, dozens and dozens of them. But that's where they first came to know each other. And he said he really wanted to adapt Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption. And Stephen King said he could. And in fact, he paid him $5,000 for the rights to it. And Stephen King never cashed that check. And when he actually got it made, he actually gave him the check back and said, here's some money you can use if you need to extra money to help get it made or something like that, which I thought was kind of cool. But anyway, that working relationship really started there in the 80s. And it was only because Darabont really started as a writer. I mean, he went through working on some of the Nightmare on Elm Street scripts and a lot more kind of horror script writing that, I mean, it fit perfectly in kind of the King realm, that type of storytelling. And that's what eventually led him to being able to do The Shawshank Redemption. And now, I mean, he was in a place where he was pretty able to kind of pick and choose what he wanted to do. And he really wanted to work with King again and came around to adapting this, which the book started coming out shortly after, a couple years after Shawshank. But in the meantime, he had been, I don't know what else he had been doing. I think that he had largely just been doing, he might have been doing some young Indiana Jones Chronicles. I think he was writing some of that as he kind of led up to this. Darabont is not a prolific filmmaker. I mean, he's only made 4 films, 3 of which we're talking about in the series because those are the Stephen King adaptations. And so it's strange that he's been so sparse in his filmmaking, but I think he gets involved in a lot bigger projects like The Walking Dead, which he was involved in for, developing it.
A season, yeah.
Yeah, the first season, developing it, writing a few episodes before he was, taken off of the show for, I don't know, all sorts of reasons behind the scenes.
Complicated,
sure. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you look at the stuff that he wrote at the beginning of his career, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, The Blob, The Fly 2. I just feel like he's got that sense of storytelling. Oh, and also Shawshank Redemption, he also wrote that same year the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Right.
So I don't know. I find him to be a really interesting, thoughtful storyteller, and he fits with this world. And starting with Shawshank Redemption, he had been working with Rob Reiner's company, which is Castle Rock Entertainment, which, I mean, Rob Reiner created Castle Rock Entertainment after he had such success with Stand By Me. And Castle Rock, of course, is a fictional town that Stephen King created. So it all kind of comes together. And here we are with the second film that Darabont did under the Castle Rock Entertainment banner.
We should found a city named Castle Rock and move there so that we can complete the Stephen King as he adapts real world around him.
Did you watch any of the Castle Rock TV series that was out for a little while?
Castle Rock TV series?
Yeah, on Hulu.
No. Yeah, I know of it. I didn't watch it. I did all of what was the other one with the town that you couldn't leave the town.
Under the Dome?
Well, I did watch all of Under the Dome, but there was another one. Oh my goodness, it's going to drive me batty. I really enjoyed it. There was a lighthouse. There's always a lighthouse.
TV series? A Stephen King TV series?
It was another Stephen King TV series, and I really enjoyed it. It ran for a lot of years. It's like this FBI agent who goes to this little town and becomes a police officer there. And it's based on his a lot of his little stories.
Well, there was Nightmares and Dreamscapes, but that was just short films or short stories. There was another series?
Yes. And I don't even see it in Stephen King's list of collected works, but I know this was a Stephen King thing.
Well, there's Mr. Mercedes, but it's not that one, is it?
No.
Because I know that's based on a number of his novels.
Ah. All right. Well, we should clearly move on, but I'm not done with this topic.
Well, we should talk a little bit more about the cast.
Yeah. So Tom Hanks.
I love him.
A urinary issue.
Well, and it's funny because you think about the number of times Tom Hanks pees in movies. There are quite a few, and this is one of them. There's certainly a lot of peeing that he gets to do here. Mostly painful, mostly not fun to have to sit and watch because, as he says, he's pissing razor blades, which is certainly nothing no one wants to try.
I don't care for it, but he does a great job at it. Man, they nail the cold sweat around his forehead, and when he falls down, I mean, if you've ever had any sort of kidney urinary thing going on, and you have that experience, falling down on the Green Mile is an okay thing. That is a perfectly rational thing to do.
Absolutely. As we said last week, he was somebody that was kind of in consideration to play Andy Dufresne. And so I think that Darabont, he met him, I think after Shawshank, actually. They actually sat and chatted, and he started thinking about him as Paul. And so I think it makes sense. And initially, they actually wanted Hanks to also play the old version, played by Dabbs Greer, who I want to talk about in a sec. But the makeup test didn't work at all. They didn't buy it. And so they ended up casting someone else, which I think is a smart thing to do. There's nothing that takes me out of a movie more when you see like the Beautiful Mind thing where you see, one of the actors at the end and you're like, oh, I just don't buy your age makeup. It's horrible.
Yeah. I don't think I buy the casting.
Talk
about
it's one
Dabbs.
of those things I end up rarely having an issue with because I know it's a hard thing to find people who look like each other. So I rarely fault any project with that. I think I generally have more of a problem if they try age makeup that I don't believe. But anyway, Dabbs Greer, this was his last film. He had been an actor who had been around for a very long time. If you were a fan of Little House on the Prairie, you saw him quite a number of times as the Reverend in that particular TV series. He was, I think, in 76 episodes in that. But also, I mean, he had been acting in TV since the early days back in the 50s. And in movies, he back since the 30s, really popping up in things. And he's one of those faces that I remember seeing in and out of things quite a bit over time. And I just love his face. And but I think it's particularly Little House that sticks in my mind as the one I remember the most, with his little kind of, I don't know what they would call that little hat that a reverend would wear back in those days, but kind of that little black hat, I was very familiar with.
I don't think I experienced as much of that show, enough to be able to talk about it. That's lost to me.
Yeah, it was a show that we regularly watched all the time as kids. So I grew up on that show, loved it.
David Morse is brutal, is fantastic.
I've always loved David Morse.
Love him.
We have talked about him far too infrequently, I think, over the course of the show. 12 Monkeys is the only thing I can think of that we've discussed that he was also in. But I just love seeing David Morse always, who is another tall actor. Let me just say now, he is very tall, and he's 6'4".
He's 6'4". Should we do a quick height aside right now? Because this is fascinating. First of all, they make Michael Clarke Duncan look like he's about 18 feet tall.
They do. They really excel in creating, like, shooting from different angles or whatever they have to do to make him just seem taller than absolutely everybody by a country mile. David Morse is 6'4". Michael Clarke Duncan is not the tallest performer here. He is second tallest because James Cromwell is actually 1 inch, maybe 2 taller than him. Yeah, Michael Clarke Duncan is 6 foot 5 1/4 inches. And which I think is crazy that James Cromwell is actually taller than him.
It's like 6'6", 6'7"?
He's 6'7". Yeah,
is that what we're saying?
6'7".
James Cromwell is 6'7"?
Yeah.
He towered over Babe.
Yeah,
Babe
right?
must have felt like an insect.
He must have felt like a little pig. Oh, wait. So I think that's funny because they do such a good job of shooting Michael Clarke Duncan to just look like he is so much bigger. In fact, they actually used in production design, they designed things that he would be using to be smaller, much like in the Lord of the Rings films, where you like his bed, they actually designed all the beds the same, except for his, they actually made smaller. So when he would lie down on it, he would look like he was that much bigger on it. Yeah.
Did they make Tom Hanks, did they use like a child's hand to shake hands? The close-up on the hands is amazing.
Right. That's a good question. That is a good question. Tom Hanks is only 6 feet. He is such a small person compared to the rest of these people.
My favorite, I think, little character exchange bit is when David Morse turns around and says, "Boss, you're going to need to get over here. He's a big boy. You're going to need to second guess getting in the cell with this guy. He's a big boy." "Well, he can't be bigger than you." And Morse looks at him and just sort of literally, I mean, the definition of scoffs.
Yeah.
And turns around and welcomes Duncan into the cell block. It was just great. Could have been Shaquille O'Neal, Andy.
Yeah, isn't that a strange thing? I mean, I think what they were doing is thinking, okay, who is a very tall African-American actor or person who has been in films? Because I think Shaquille O'Neal had been in Blue Chips, Kazam, Good Burger, and Steel, and Chairman of the Board. So he had been in a few films before he would have potentially been considered for this film.
I don't want to like armchair what Shaquille O'Neal could have been, but I think Michael Clarke Duncan deserves all the kudos that he gets from this movie.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And Michael Clarke Duncan had been in Armageddon before this. And, I mean, in addition to some other films, we didn't talk about him, but apparently he was one of the craps players in Friday, which I think is interesting. I don't think we even realized that at the time. But he had been in bit parts in things like Bulworth. He was the bouncer in Bulworth. And he was credited, it was very cute, as Michael Big Mike Duncan. But it was Armageddon where he worked with Bruce Willis. And Bruce Willis actually is the one who mentioned to Frank Darabont, "Hey, I just worked with this guy. He might be perfect." And that's how it came to be that he was in the Green Mile.
It was perfect. It's great.
Yeah. And just sadly, we just have to also point out that Michael Clarke Duncan did die at only 54 years old in 2012.
Really sad.
Yeah.
Really sad. Nice gift that he can be remembered from a performance like this.
Absolutely.
James Cromwell is Hal Morris. He is the warden, and he is great. Very tall, great. And very sympathetic. This is what I love about this performance, is that it could have been super tropey. It could have been the guy who never comes around. And the sequence where they break Coffey out of jail and take him to the house without handcuffs or leg cuffs or anything. They just take him in the back of a truck to go help the lady is a real highlight of the film for me, because it shows that there's sympathy, so much sympathy and empathy in grief in what he's going through, and that he's able to come around and let this giant of a man into this room with his frail, broken wife. It's just magical. It is magical.
And Patricia Clarkson as his wife, in a small part, but I think that she was nice to see in there. Yeah, it's a very touching pair, the two of them.
And Michael Jeter, national treasure, Michael Jeter.
Yeah. Speaking of, I mentioned David Morse with 12 Monkeys. Here we have Michael Jeter from Fisher King. Just loved his performance there. Love his performance here. He's another person that we lost, sadly, far too early. Just seeing him do performances like this. I mean, he died in 2003. I really enjoyed him, and it was great to see him here in this particular role, and very awful having to watch him go through what he does when he dies.
Yeah, it really is. His accent work is terrific. I never feel like he's broken character. He's just he was always a incredible character performer, and delightful to see him here.
Yep.
We've already talked about Doug Hutchison and Sam Rockwell, obviously terrific.
But I just want to go through, since we're talking about the guards and their heights, Doug Hutchison, 5'5.5". So at this point, the shortest of all the guards.
He is, and they do compellingly make him look exactly half as tall as Michael Clarke Duncan.
Right.
Really great.
Barry Pepper, I mean, he's a favorite of mine. I just love seeing him in whatever he pops up in. He's 5'10", another of the guards. And
are we going to do this now?
I totally am, for all the guards. It has to be done.
Can we do it for other movies too? Like, this is like the APPFM of performers.
Only when there's a height-related story.
All right.
I apologize. But Jeffrey DeMunn, who people should recognize as a Darabont kind of character. He was the attorney, the defense attorney, or no, he was the prosecuting attorney at the very beginning.
At the very beginning,
Andy Dufresne, yeah. And so, and then of course, anyone who watched The Walking Dead would have seen him pop up in that as well. And so he's another Darabont regular, 5'9".
5'9".
Yeah. So there you go.
Okay.
And I also just have to say how funny it is that Barry Pepper plays a character named Dean Stanton. And we also have Harry Dean Stanton in the film playing the trustee. And it's such a small part, but it just, again, reminds me how much I always enjoy seeing Harry Dean Stanton pop up in films.
Who we also lost in 2017.
Yeah.
Ripe old age of 91.
Yeah. He was...
Well done, Harry.
Yeah. And then last but not least, Bonnie Hunt plays Tom Hanks' wife. And, she's somebody I've always enjoyed. And, but again, this is one of those roles that feels like, the wife. It's not as interestingly written. But it works. She does a good job for what it is.
Well, she does a great job for what it is, particularly because she's not known as a dramatic performer, right? I mean, she is, I think, known first and foremost as a comedic performer, and she's terrific at it. But it's nice to see her in a role that's a little bit more comedically subdued because she's terrific.
She is great. Yeah. Certainly has been busy in a lot of animated, like Pixar films.
Yeah,
like the last 20 years. Yeah, a lot of that sort of stuff. So,
who did the camera on this thing?
Darabont's crew was, he shook things up a little bit. David Tattersall did the cinematography, who, has done a lot of stuff. Also, the same year was busy on Star Wars Episode 1, but certainly a very busy filmmaker, and would go on to do The Majestic with Darabont next. And I think that was it for the two of them. But, I think that the cinematography looks great. I enjoy the look. I have no issues with anything the way it's shot. I think that they light it well, and they play with the lighting, the sparking of the lights and everything.
Yeah.
I like how all that comes through.
Well, and there's a lot of opportunity working with the production design because this was predominantly a set. And so they could do a lot of things with it, right? They actually had a lot of flexibility to blow up light bulbs and create the beautiful cathedral ceilings. I think what we saw last week, though, in Shawshank, shooting at the real location, is that there were these beautiful Gothic, prisons that evoke the same sort of experience, at least served in this case as a terrific model. But I think they could have done it in a cool location without all that flexibility, I think, of being able to just, blow the place up whenever they needed to.
Yeah.
It is beautiful.
And it was Terrence Marsh who did the Shawshank we talked about last week, who also was production designer on this film. And that's it. No more films. He pretty much, it looks like he retired shortly after The Green Mile. So, no more films after that.
Thomas Newman,
also returning to music to work with Darabont, having worked on Shawshank. And I mean, great music, just fantastic music on Shawshank. I don't like the score as much here. I think it works fine. It's effective for what the story is, but it doesn't stick with me as much as Shawshank did last week.
I agree with that. Shawshank is eminently listenable, and this one is, I think, more forgettable.
It's weirdly like what sticks with me from this film with the music is the mouse, like the like that. That's the music that sticks with me, not the big emotional things.
Yeah.
So I think that's strange, and he doesn't end up coming back to work on the next two films with Darabont. But Richard Francis Bruce did the editing, and I think that again, also Shawshank and Green Mile, and then again, I think that that's it with Darabont. So it's interesting. He seems to kind of, and maybe it's because he's a filmmaker who just works so irregularly that
hard
people
to
are
get
busy.
the same crew. Yeah,
exactly. I don't know exactly why, but I think the editing is fine here, especially for a film that's 3 hours. I don't ever feel bored with it. I feel like it's creating a space, it's creating a sense of time, and it's allowing for the characters. And so I never once felt bored through the duration of the film, even the beginning and end.
I think it is a long movie. It compared to Shawshank, which was what, 2.5 roughly.
A little about, yeah.
I didn't notice time passing with Shawshank. I never noticed time passing.
Yeah.
I noticed time with this movie. It feels like I'm making a 3-hour commitment. It doesn't feel like time is moving more quickly than it is. It doesn't feel, it feels overlong only in the opening 10 minutes and closing 10 minutes. But when I'm in the experience of the Green Mile, it feels appropriate, right? It still feels like a 3-hour commitment I'm making. I don't lose time in it. I'm aware that it's a long movie. And I think that's notable compared to what we just experienced with Shawshank. And I don't think I've ever watched these films quite so back to back. And I just found that I enjoyed my experience with Shawshank so much more.
Yeah. Well, I think it's by far the superior film. That's not to say that this one isn't watchable. It's just, I feel like they're kind of delivering something different.
Yeah. Yeah. How'd it do at award season?
Yeah, it was a popular film at award season, but more so for the nominations than for the wins. It did have 15 wins, but 37 other nominations. At the Oscars, it had 4 nominations: Best Picture, but lost to American Beauty; Best Supporting Actor, Michael Clarke Duncan, but lost to Michael Caine in The Cider House Rules, which also won for Best Adapted Screenplay, which Darabont lost, and Best Sound, and I think largely because of the execution scene, perhaps, but that one lost to The Matrix. Over at the Golden Globes, Michael Clarke Duncan was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He got a lot of the recognition as for this particular film, but he lost to Tom Cruise in Magnolia. Over at the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror, or the Saturn Awards, this was nominated for Best Action, Adventure, and Thriller Film and won. And Michael Clarke Duncan also won for Best Supporting Actor. And weirdly, Patricia Clarkson was nominated for Best Supporting Actress for her very small part as Melinda, who's sick. We really only see in that, mainly in that one scene, and she won. Frank Darabont, I know, it's very strange. Frank Darabont was nominated for Best Director, but lost to the Wachowskis for The Matrix. Yeah. And Thomas Newman was nominated for his score, but lost to Danny Elfman for Sleepy Hollow.
I can see that.
Yeah, I can too. Again, it's a strong score in context of the film, but it doesn't stick with me at all.
How about the box office? This movie didn't do all that badly.
Well, Darabont got a lot more money for King number 2. He had $60 million to work with, which is $92.4 million in today's dollars. The movie was released December 10th, 1999, where it opened up in the number 1 spot opposite Deuce Bigalow, Male Gigolo, The Cider House Rules, Cradle Will Rock, and the limited release for Diamonds. It couldn't hold the number 1 spot after that, though, as the holiday glut just kept pushing it down. But it did still stay in the top 10 for at least 10 weeks. It did go on to earn $136.8 million domestically and $153.9 million internationally for a total gross of $447.7 million in today's dollars. That lands the film with an adjusted profit per finished minute of almost $1.9 million, which is really impressive, given its over 3-hour length.
Very impressive at 3 hours. That's crazy. It's still not Shawshank. I kind of expected going into this series that I was going to put Green Mile. It's been a lot longer since I had watched Green Mile than Shawshank. And my memory of it was that I liked it a lot more.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then you did, or that you liked it a lot more than Shawshank?
That I liked it more than Shawshank. My memory of it was that this was a slam dunk. That I was
according to Frank Darabont, this is his best film. It's his, for him, he said it was his best filmmaking experience. So he really got a lot out of making this. Stephen King, now granted, Stephen King's lists always seem to favor the ones that are just released, but when he was kind of a guest writer in Entertainment Weekly for a time. And I remember when this film came out, he had this at the number 1 spot over Shawshank. Again, I think it's because it had just come out. But it's a film I think both of them hold in very high esteem. I think it's a very good translation of the book. I just always end up feeling like it's episodic. I enjoy it. I think it's a strong story. I do think now, looking at it through the eyes of that magical Negro, it's a little harder to kind of stomach some of the elements in the story. But I still find it a very emotional ride. I still think that it's exceptionally told. I don't like it nearly as much as Shawshank.
Yep, that has become abundantly clear for me.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we should probably take it to the mat.
I think we should. Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we talked about on this fair show. If you swipe over in your show notes, tap the word Flickchart, it should take you straight to the Flickchart database where you can add this movie to your list and see how it stands up against ours.
All right, first up, we have The Green Mile or Il Postino, the Postman.
Probably Green Mile.
Yeah, I'm already at a point where I'm like, I could go either way on this one. I'll favor The Green Mile, but yeah, kind of either way. The Green Mile or Fargo?
Fargo.
Absolutely Fargo. The Green Mile or Targets? Oh, Targets for me, yeah.
Targets.
The Green Mile or The Town?
The Town.
The Town. The Green Mile or M, Fritz Lang's film?
M.
I'll say M. The Green Mile or Life of the Party? You know where I'm going on this one, baby.
Life of the Party, please.
Life of the Party. The Green Mile or Thelma and Louise, your favorite Ridley Scott movie?
The Green Mile.
I'll say Thelma and Louise.
All right, here we go.
1, 2, 3. Rock.
Paper.
Oh, Green Mile takes it.
All right.
The Green Mile or Creepshow? All right, some Stephen King. I would say Creepshow.
I'd watch Creepshow first.
The Green Mile or The Bank Job?
Bank Job.
Oh, Bank Job, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that lands Green Mile. It's pretty close to the middle. It's spot 249 on our chart, which is a 51%. 249 out of 506 films.
It did better on my list. It actually, it landed at 307. I re-ranked this one, unlike Shawshank, because I felt like this needed to be taken down a peg. And in fact, it was taken down just a few pegs. I think originally it was like 296 and it came down at 307, which is a 79% out of 100 and 79% out of 702. Ugh, idiot. Anyway, according to the Flickchart algorithm, if I head over to thenextreel.com/letterbox, it should be a 4-star. How'd it fare on your own list?
It's in spot 756 out of 4,615. So that puts it at about an 84%, which is a 4-star according to the algorithm.
Mm-hmm. And so what does that do for you for stars? Letterbox, what are you doing? Are you going to put it there?
I don't think so. I think I'm okay with this being 3.5 with a heart because I still enjoy this film. But I think it's one of those films that I don't see returning to that often, even though I enjoy a lot of elements with it.
Yeah, I think I'm there too, Andy. I was thinking of leaning up on the 4-star, but the more we talk about it, the more I am filled with flashback rage. And I just think I'm going to leave it at a 3.5 star.
Are you going to give it a heart though?
I am. Yeah, I'll absolutely give it a heart.
Okay.
A urinary tract heart.
Ouch. That's crossing two parts of your body that it just seems awful when you describe it that way. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. Okay, so that's what we do. That's what we got here. Now we have one more in our King Darabont series that we're going to do. It's from 2007, I think. What are we doing next?
Yes, we're going to be ending this Stephen King a la Darabont series with his 2007 adaptation of The Mist.
What do you think of The Mist?
I really like it. And this is another example of a film that has been released both in the original theatrical all-color version or the director's preferred version of the black and white.
I haven't seen it.
You've never seen the movie?
I've never seen the movie. I went and I watched the trailer, and it was completely news to me.
Interesting.
How was it released? Was it part of a collection?
It was actually an early collection. It was in it's in Skeleton Crew, which was published in 1985. A collection of short fiction. The story itself was released in 1980 in Dark Forces, an anthology of horror stories. So
interesting.
Yeah, that is one that I should try to check out again if I have a chance.
I might have to do the same. Very exciting. All right, this has been great. It's been great to explore this movie. I like that we're going a little bit back in time, and that we almost have the entire Darabont collection knocked out.
I know.
The completionist in me is very excited to do that last movie.
Well, I'll tell you, I am going to watch The Majestic just to check it out because I have never seen that one. So I do want to check it out before we talk about The Mist, just so I can at least have that in my arsenal in case I need to talk about it.
I, just in terms of finishing this thread, the television show is called Haven, loosely based on The Colorado Kid. Ran from 2010 to 2015. Takes place in the coastal town of Haven, Maine. And they all have curses or troubles that trigger horrible things. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we know when the movie ends.
Our conversation begins. Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
Okay. I've been looking forward to this since I found this review earlier this morning, because it is something that is totally, totally new to me. And I can't wait to introduce it to you. I hope you have never seen it before.
Oh, that's exciting.
My review is from Jay. It is a 4-star review. And the review reads, "This is Tom Hanks' second best performance after his work in the Carly Rae Jepsen I Really Like You music video." Have you seen the Carly Rae Jepsen I Really Like You music video, Andy?
I have.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I so regret that I couldn't introduce this to you. How does Tom Hanks, what universe, what magical Stephen King level mystical force or shine has brought Tom Hanks into this Carly Rae Jepsen music video? Is she like his niece or something? Please, I need to know all of this. It is, the entire music video is Tom Hanks lip syncing her song and walking down the streets. And it's incredible.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how that came to pass. I think it was very funny.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, don't just imagine it. This is what I'm saying. If you're a fan of Carly Rae Jepsen, you should obviously have already seen this video. If you're not, just imagine what it would be like to have Tom Hanks as Tom Hanks, not as a character, walking down the streets of New York and lip syncing bubblegum pop song. And that's enough. You'll probably have enough of it, but it has delighted me. It has lit up my day. Absolutely. Yeah.
With Justin Bieber, it's like a strange crossing of worlds that you don't think are connected. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. It is the worlds collide. They've crossed the streams in this video is what they've done. This is what it looks like when you cross the streams. You get this video. That's all.
If only the Ghostbusters, if only it appeared at the end of Ghostbusters.
I'll put it in the show notes.
There you go. Well, I've got a 1-star review by, you went high, I went low. Mm-hmm. This is a 1-star by Jack420, who had this to say. Just another effing prison that's 3 hours. I think they meant prison movie. That's 3 hours long. And Tom Hanks looks like he ate too much GD Wendy's at the GD Brewery.
What? Come on.
He doesn't look that bad.
He does not look. It was for the part.
It's not pre-Island Castaway that we're looking at here.
Right. So good. Thanks, Letterboxd. It's hard to believe we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchase is made through our links. Give us a small commission at no extra cost to you, and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We covered a lot of great movies that were adapted from other material in Season 10.
Our Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals is where listeners can purchase the source material behind all our adapted film discussions. It helps support the show at no extra cost when you buy through our links.
In our foreign language Best Picture nominees series, we looked at several adaptations, including Z, The Postman Il Postino, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Letters from Iwo Jima.
We hit the high seas with In the Heart of the Sea from Nathaniel Philbrick's nonfiction book for our Aquatic Killers series.
Definitely a weaker entry in that series.
I bet the book is better.
Oh, me too.
Member bonus episodes featured adaptations like Gone Girl, The Russia House, Ivanhoe, The Hot Rock, The Big Heat, and Naked Lunch.
Oliver Stone brought not just original stories, but also adaptations like Conan the Barbarian, Scarface, Year of the Dragon, 8 Million Ways to Die, Talk Radio, and Born on the 4th of July.
Mary Herron's disturbingly insightful American Psycho was adapted from the Bret Easton Ellis book.
You like Huey Lewis in the News?
Oh my God, it even has a watermark.
And of course, more Stephen King with The Mist, The Green Mile, and The Shawshank Redemption for our King a la Darabont series.
Find links to all of these books and more adapted films on our originals page. That's thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports our show.
Get the full list of books that we've talked about and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.